Okay, please have a seat. We're going to start in about a minute or two. I think there are sessions which have been finished just now, so we may have to wait for them for half a minute. We'll see. Do you want to try it again?
I get a message, the host isn't allowing sharing for this meeting.
I'm sorry.
Sharing is not turned on. So I think you need to make me host or?
Okay, Professor Biesta, do you want to try it again? Can you just cancel it and try to ask for the permission once more?
Let me see. That's not there.
Okay. Okay, this should be fine now.
Yeah.
Great. Oh, okay, that's good.
Good. Thanks.
That's beautiful. All right, so shall we get started? I know this is very last session and finale of the ICER 2026. So thank you so much for being with us until this very late moment of the conference. My name is Kyungmin Lee. I'm chair of the conference as well as associate professor here at the Department of Education at SNU. This is my greatest pleasure to introduce our last keynote speaker, Professor Gott Biesta. Gott Biesta is professor at the University of Melbourne, Australia, and as we all know, one of the most influential scholars in contemporary educational theory and philosophy of education. His work has strongly shaped, and I have to say probably more likely, challenged how we think about the purpose of education and roles of students and teachers, and the relationship between education and the society. Today, Gert will deliver a keynote titled Metanoia, or The Change of Heart. What comes after the age of the worldview? In this talk, he takes up the central question of the conference, what it means to conduct education research in the time of proliferating post-positions. So many of them right now. So Professor Groth will invite us to think critically about the very idea of taking a perspective. We know, while we often speak of adopting a theoretical lens or positioning ourselves within a particular framework of thinking, his keynote will ask otherwise. Without further ado, please join me in warmly and loudest welcoming Professor Gott Biesta.
Good. Thank you very much for that introduction. Good afternoon for you. I'm very sorry that I can't be with you in person, and I'm very grateful for the organizers that they managed at last notice to move the schedule around so that I can still speak to you live via this connection, and I think we can make that work. I'm also very grateful for the invitation to contribute to the conference. The topic is interesting. I even think it's a very urgent topic, but it's not easy. In my presentation, I will take a particular angle, and I hope I can share the main line of thinking with you. I read most parts of my English text, and I also have some PowerPoint slides, so I hope that together will work. Now, in the title of my presentation, I used the Greek word metanoia, and this can indeed be translated as a change of heart, and I will explain why I use that idea. What I'll try to argue is that rather than looking for new perspectives in our time or new theoretical or philosophical positions, there is perhaps also another third needed, and that's a turn we need to make ourselves. So my paper is quite philosophical, but I hope that it fits in the broader discussion. I'll get my PowerPoint up as well now. There it is. Okay. The underlying structure of my argument is, I think, quite simple, and I'd like to share that with a few pictures. And if you can keep these pictures in mind, then probably you should get a sense of what I'm trying to do. I will start my discussion with the idea of the age of the worldview. And this literally means the age in which we understand ourselves as viewers of a world outside of us. And I'll use the picture on the left for that. What I'll try to make clear is that this is not a neutral idea, but that it has emerged at a particular point in recent history. And I also think in a particular location. We could call it a Western location. Now, there are definitely gains to this idea, but also losses. And I will talk about the gains and losses. And what I then want to work towards is an alternative or different way to relate to the world. And there I use a phrase from the biography of the philosopher Hannah Arendt for the love of the world. And the term that I'm talking about is then, you could say, how we might change from world viewers to world lovers. And if you want a picture in your mind of what love for the world might look like, this is not a bad picture. So the call for contributions to the conference raises a number of big, important, but also difficult questions. They are big because they relate to a range of movements, shifts, and claims, which, although they all have this word post in it, are, I think, different in nature and scope and orientation. The questions are important because they touch upon the very foundations of educational research and educational practice by challenging commonly held assumptions about what it is to know and what it is to teach. And the questions are difficult, not just because they are complicated, but I think first of all because they raise the bigger question from what kind of point or position it's actually possible to engage with these questions. Now, the intuition in the approach I'll take in my presentation is that many of the post positions we're talking about do indeed present themselves as positions, or more specifically, and that's the word I will use, as perspective. That's how they show up in everyday conversations, but also in research, where researchers take a particular theoretical perspective, or they look through a particular theoretical lens, and you'll know that language. What I'll try to argue is that this idea of taking a perspective has a very particular history and is linked to a very particular configuration, I'll use that word, to which the philosopher Martin Heidegger has referred as the age of the worldview. So it's the configuration of viewing the world. I'll talk about where this configuration comes from. As I said, I will talk about gains and problems, and then I'll explore, can we go beyond that and what would that imply? And towards the end, I will suggest it asks something of us. It all starts somewhere here with the idea of taking a perspective, which is a very common way to talk in conversations when people say, from my perspective, or also ask other people, what's your perspective on this? This is also what happens in research that often takes a particular perspective, a European perspective, perspective from the global south, post-structural perspective, feminist perspective, post-colonial perspective, many perspectives. And there's definitely something good about it, because by prefacing what you say with my perspective, you clearly put your cards on the table. And it takes away the suggestion that you would speak from nowhere or for everything. The language of perspectives has, I think, become so common, that's at least what I started to see, that it's easy to forget that this very idea of perspective has a history, and is not as universal as it may sound. Now, one history of this idea of taking a perspective goes back to Italy, to 15th century Florence, and to this person, Filippo di Ser Brunellesco, who is generally seen as the inventor of linear perspectival drawing. He was the first to manage to represent three-dimensional structures, buildings, onto a two-dimensional surface, but still that it looked like three-dimensional. Now, on the one hand, we can see this as a technical achievement in light of a long history of art and drawing of non-perspectival visual art. But it's not just an advance in drawing, it also has done something, a reconfiguration with the relationship between human beings and the world. What is first of all distinctive about perspectival drawing is that it defines a precise standpoint for the observer. It defines where the observer stands as the point from where the observer observes what is to be seen, and to observe it in the right perspective, so to say. So perspectival drawing defines a field in which the observer is positioned, and also the object that is being observed also has a particular position. And this is very different from, for example, ancient Egyptian art or religious icons, where there is no defined point for the observer to be, and that therefore is a very different field of relationships. You could say that in non-perspectival art, the observer can be anywhere, which also means that the observer is nowhere or nowhere in particular. So keep that image in mind. Now, viewed in this way, the invention of perspectival drawing marks a wider reconfiguration of this relationship between human beings and the world. It is a reconfiguration in which human beings appear as observers of the world from a particular standpoint, and where the world appears as that which is being observed by the observer from their standpoint. And this is a big frame, I think, for an awful lot of research, including educational research. So in this configuration, individuals gain the identity of world viewers. And as world viewers, they encounter the world, the natural world, the social world, as an object to observe from their standpoint. Now, in one sense, this is a real gain because it allows for a defined position for each individual in relation to the world, and this is important. It thus brings about a kind of freedom for each individual, which we can call the freedom of observation, the right to observe, the freedom of a standpoint, and the freedom of having a perspective. But I think, and that's my way into the discussion, having a perspective, this configuration also entails a loss, because in it the individual only arrives as a viewer of objects, which not just turns the world into an object for viewing, but also puts the observer at a distance from the world. And again, in the picture, you see that the observer is looking at a distance. The gain of the freedom for the individual to have a perspective, this comes with losses. And I use some big words here. A loss of the world, because the world becomes an object, but also a loss of location, because it's not immediately clear where actually this individual observer stands. So this is the configuration and some of the problems. Now, one question this raises is whether perspectivism should be characterized as a typical modern way to view the world. And here I refer to a fascinating text from Martin Heidegger called The Age of the Worldview, in which he suggests that what is modern here is not this particular way of viewing the world, of seeing this configuration, but the very idea of the world understood as view. So therefore, he says, it's not that there is a shift from, say, a medieval worldview to a modern worldview. Heidegger suggests that it's that the world becomes view, which is distinctive of modern times. And therefore he calls modern times the age of the worldview. Heidegger calls this a transformation, just as I've called it a reconfiguration. And this is so because it's not that an already existing individual with a clear identity just changes the way in which they view the world, but rather that individual and world emerge together in a new relationship. And then Heidegger says it's now for the first time that there is such a thing as a viewpoint for human beings. He uses the word, or the word man is used in English. So Heidegger says more about this. He describes this process as a kind of double move in which the world becomes more and more objective, and the more the world becomes objective, the more subjective our individual perspectives become. Because the subject becomes more and more subjective, the more the world becomes a view, there is a risk that this development can end up in what Heidegger characterizes as a battle of worldviews. And this is an important idea as well, where he says it looks like at the end we will end up in just fighting over our different perspectives. In this battle, Heidegger says the human being fights for the position in which he can be that being which sets the standards for how we should view the world. And this means that he is not just talking about truth or epistemology, but this also has political significance. And if you think how in our time Trump and Putin, for example, are fighting over their view of the world, you can see how accurate and urgent this is. Now, the first thing to mention here is that if it's the case that it's only in the age of the worldview that the world becomes something to view and the individual becomes a viewer from their unique free standpoint, then we can no longer use this as a neutral idea. And therefore, Heidegger says, we cannot talk any longer about a Greek or a Roman or a medieval worldview. We should rather think of them as different configurations of which world viewing is only one possible option. Second thing to highlight is that when the world becomes view or picture, the world itself is in a sense lost. And this also means that the individual in a sense begins to disappear from the world because the world is out there, outside of us to view. And the individual stands outside of this world and before this world. And you can see developments in modern Western philosophy where the whole question of knowledge and whether we can still know what knowledge is becomes a big problem. But the issues are not just philosophical and not merely of the past. I think we are in the middle of significant problems that have to do with this idea of perspectivism. Post-truth is one example of this idea that truth is no longer certain and the truth is just becoming a perspective. And there you can see the concern of the battle of worldviews, the battle of perspectives. I also see an influence in the domain of values, where the logic of perspectivism has resulted in a situation where we conflate values with preferences, which is a very different way to think about what value and values are than from the idea that things or beings may have value in themselves. So values again become part of perspectivism. And one could also argue, and that's part of my connection with the theme of the conference, that the whole proliferation of positions and ontologies and isms such as posthumanism, new materialism, relational ontology, are also looking for new perspectives on the world and therefore stay within the configuration of the worldview. So there are gains in the age of the worldview, but also losses and problems. And because there are problems, there is a question, where can we go? What would this require from us. So if perspectivism entails a certain loss of the world and also a certain loss of the self who now stands outside and before the world, there is the question whether we can return the world and return the self in some way. And this, and I hope you see what I'm trying to do, is not the search for a new perspective, but it's the search for a new configuration. And what I want to do in this section is to go to the tradition of phenomenology in 20th century philosophy, because I think that all these thinkers were precisely trying to recapture the world and recapture the self. It's highlighted in a phrase from one founder of phenomenology, Edmund Husserl, who said we need to go back to the things themselves. What phenomenology therefore starts to do is to put the thing back in the center and ask how can we go back to the thing. And that is different from the question of observing the thing or the world from a distance. Whereas Husserl's ambition was to go back to the things themselves, Heidegger proposed a different agenda, or a next step, you could say, because he asked the question, how do things, in the broader sense of the word, how do things actually exist? An investigation into the being of things, you could say. Now, if in the logic of perspectivism, the individual is always in the center and views the things around them, actively projecting a perspective onto the world, the way in which Heidegger, for example, looks at human beings is very different, the way in which human beings show up. And in a sense, you can say it's the opposite of the worldview configuration. Heidegger emphasizes qualities such as passivity, receptivity, which is also captured in his suggestion that we should talk about human beings. And he uses the German word Dasein, which can be translated as a being who is there. And then he asks these beings who are there, their existence in the world is characterized by openness to the world, by a standing out to the world, which is one way to understand this word existence, to stand out. Heidegger also talks about the idea of thrownness, that we are thrown into the world and find ourselves there, and that everything doesn't start, therefore, with us. There is a passive and a receptive dimension to this, although with the idea of care that Heidegger also writes about, he suggests that this also requires a certain attitude, you could say, of caring for the world. In another text, The Letter to Humanism, Heidegger not only claims that language is the house of being, very interesting idea to say where we live is in a world of language, but that as human beings, we are guardians of this house. We are literally caretakers of the possibility to exist in this way. So here you have philosophers who try to come up with different configurations, different ways in which we can think about our existence in the world. And I'm doing this very quickly, but of course these are big discussions. So you see here trends of trying to bring the world back in. The other quick line of idea I want to share is the question about how the self, in a sense, can be returned. What kind of configuration is required for that? So Husserl and Heidegger are after a very different configuration than the setup of perspectivism. Husserl goes back to the things. Heidegger doesn't deny things, but is interested in how things, living things, inanimate things, how they exist. The configurations they are exploring are not only about how the world appears, but also about how the self, how individual human beings show up. Husserl understands this in terms of how things appears to human consciousness, and therefore he already assumes that we are beings with consciousness. Heidegger is a bit more radical, you could say. He highlights that human beings are there, and he emphasizes these qualities of receptivity, openness, care, guardianship, ways in which we stand out to the world. And that's a very different position from being a world viewer. Now, although Heidegger makes a case that we should be open to what comes to us, there is an important question: how human beings might be able to judge what to be receptive to, what to let in, what to take care of, and where to say no, which is a moral question and also a political question. After all, if there is only resonance, if everything resonates with everything, but if there is no judgment, the human being will just become an echo chamber for anything that comes in its direction. And here I briefly want to highlight the importance of another author in the phenomenological tradition, Emmanuel Levinas. Levinas' work is also a critique of what he calls the egological worldview, the suggestion that the ego stands before the world in space and time and views the world from their position. When Levinas suggests that we should not see knowledge as the starting point, but ethics as first philosophy, you'll see the title of the book there, he is not suggesting that everyone should be ethical or responsible, and he's also not suggesting that we have some kind of fundamental ability to be responsible. Rather, he says, and this is difficult but precise language, that responsibility is the essential, primary, and fundamental structure of subjectivity. Now, what does he mean with that? There is a very helpful sentence in a book from the sociologist Zygmunt Bauman, who explains that ethics as first philosophy means that responsibility is the first reality of the self. And what he means by that is that myself, I become an issue for myself, not for others, but for me, when I encounter a responsibility. So we could say that responsibility is objective, it simply exists. We encounter a responsibility. Someone asks us a question, someone looks at us, and then you can say, it's in that moment that I encounter myself and my freedom. Because when I encounter a question or a request, it is for me to figure out whether to say yes or no, whether I take up this responsibility or not. And of course, we can help each other or we can distract each other from this, but ultimately it comes back to me what to do. And you can therefore say, when we meet responsibility, I am called into my own existence. So while there is a risk that Heidegger just says, be open and let everything in, Levinas helps us to point to this precise moment when myself becomes an issue for me. This moment where we have to figure out, do I say yes or no? And there you can say our existence comes into existence because of what comes to us. So this is not autonomy, but heteronomy. But Levinas emphasizes again and again, that doesn't mean that we should just be open. We need to keep thinking, we need to keep judging and remain as wise as we can. So I've tried very quickly to say, how might the world come in again? How might the self be regained? And then I go to the fifth and last step, which is another author in the phenomenological tradition, who I have found very helpful to think through the turn I am suggesting here. This is Jean-Luc Marion, who throughout his career has been exploring this other gesture, you could say, this other direction, not from me viewing the world, but what comes from elsewhere to me. And he has done this by writing a number of interesting books on the whole question of the gift and the phenomenon of givenness and being given. And what he has been trying to explore is what this notion of that things are given to you, what that actually is. He gives a very short formulation of his insight with the principle that he says, everything that shows itself must first give itself. And he makes an important point there because it suggests that before we can start knowing, before we can start understanding, before we can start doing research or trying to make sense, before we can even experience something, something must give itself to us. Now, for the line I'm pursuing this presentation, it's particularly Marion's discussion of what he refers to as two attitudes towards things that I find very helpful, because he says we can be in this world in two different ways. He says one attitude, and he says this attitude is very widespread, and it's the attitude for which we're constantly being trained and educated, consists in reducing the chance that the things around us and the human beings around us will surprise us. So he says it's an attitude where we try to reduce the possibility that we are surprised by the world around us. So what we constantly try to do is to try to better control the world around us. He writes that in this attitude, we really count on being able to anticipate situations, to be able to react, to control, to correct, to secure. And Marion says if we live out of this attitude, and I think it's the attitude of technology, for example, we live in a world where we find ourselves surrounded by objects. And objects are there because they allow us to get grip on the world outside of us. So the world of objects is the world we, in a sense, construct so that we are in the center. But then Marion argues, and this is in line with what I've also tried to say, that to think of everything outside of us just as an object, we only are at a very thin and superficial layer of things, because everything that it leaves to the side is everything we cannot foresee, everything we cannot anticipate, everything that is unknowable. And then Marion says precisely there, things are given to us because the things that resist our approach as making them into objects, they come to us from our own initiative. So this is the important point to bear in mind, these two very different attitudes towards the world where we are in control, and the world, you can say, that surprises us. And there, in the things that surprise us, in other human beings who surprise us, who do things that are beyond our control, a place and a moment are described where we must know how to go in order to be found. And we need to do work in order to move out of this world that is only the world of objects. Marion gives a very interesting example of a painting in a church in Rome, where when you just look at the painting, it looks like a very strange painting, just with all kind of blurs on it. But then you need to begin to move to somewhere from the side of the painting, and suddenly you see an image in the painting. And he uses that idea to say, this is what we actually need to do. We need to do work in order to find the point where we can be found by the painting. And this is precisely not our perspective on the painting, but we need to do the work and need to obey, as he says, the painting in order to see it. And that's a very different way to think about what seeing is. And then Marion says, again, it sounds like we should be passive and open, but he says the term passivity is not good enough. because he says, I cannot remain passive in front of things that occur. I have to make myself available, or he says, I run away from it. Similar to Levinas, who says, if we encounter a responsibility, we either say yes or we walk away from it. And there we still have a decision to make. So he says, in order to become passive, in order to be really open to what comes to us, to what is given to us, we still need to be active. We need to work hard to open ourselves. And this also requires courage, because we do not know what may occur. And for me, this has something to do with teaching, but we can come back to that if it's interesting. So Marion is fully aware that before trying to respond to the world as a call, there is a more difficult thing to do, that is to discover that there is a call, being able to interpret, as he writes it, that what exists outside of us and comes to us is a call. And then he says something interesting, because he says this decision to take things as calls, so think for a moment, a way of leading your life where everything you encounter, everything you see, everyone you meet, you try to understand and take as a call. That decision decides everything else. Now, Marion calls this a decision, and it looks like that he says it's ultimately up to us to decide whether we want to see the world as call or as an object for our control. But here, I think Marion is trying to say something else, because this is not a decision about what the world is, that would be a perspective, but it is a decision about my own life. It is a decision to let the call of the world in, to not deny it, to try to conduct my life from now onwards out of this attitude. So this decision, so we might say, is first and foremost a change of heart, and definitely not a change of perspective. And that is exactly what this Greek word metanoia means. It is precisely a turning around of one's own life. That brings me to my concluding comments. As the call for contributions to the conference states, the prefix post has become pervasive across contemporary scholarship, and there are many posts listed there. Rather than exploring the merits of particular post positions and the perspectives they offer, which is important work as well, I have asked a different and bigger question about this very idea of taking a perspective. And rather than assuming that the idea of a perspective is neutral and outside of history, I've suggested that it has a very particular history and location in time. This is the age of the worldview, and I've tried to indicate the problems that come with this particular configuration, but also the gains. But because there are problems, I've tried to explore where can we go after. The different configuration I have suggested is one where we no longer meet the world as an object about which we have views, but where we try to meet the world as question, as call, perhaps even as imperative. And in one and the same way, when we try to meet the world differently, we also begin to meet ourselves differently, namely as a being in question, so we might say. And therefore, the guiding question for us is no longer how we want to view the world, but rather what the world is asking of us. It's in light of that question that we meet our freedom again, but not as the freedom of having a view or opinion, but precisely this freedom to say yes to what the world is asking of us, or to say no, this is not a question we should take on. And this is not a theoretical option or another perspective, but it has something to do with how we conduct our life. That's the change of heart. Now, I'm aware that my presentation has raised all these issues in a very abstract and theoretical manner. And I think it's important to do so. I wish to conclude by highlighting that I'm actually talking about very everyday experiences, and that the real challenge is whether we are, in a sense, still able to experience what, in a sense, is closest to us. After all, we meet the world as question in the encounter with plants, because plants are not interested in our opinions or interpretations. They need care and attention. We meet the world as question when we encounter animals, cats, dogs, hamsters, rabbits, who also all need our care and attention and are not interested in our opinion. And this is also what the encounter with other human beings is about. As long as we see other human beings just as objects for our interpretation or even judgment, no encounter will take place. But other human beings are not objects. They speak to us, they look into our eyes, they may ask us questions, they may ask for help. And in all of them, we meet them as question rather than as object. And somewhere here, I think there are new openings for education itself, and I've written about that in this book. But I also think the fascinating question is, what would this imply for research? I've provided some groundwork for exploring these new openings, and I hope this will help in thinking through where we might go in our time, where I think at the big political scene, we do indeed see a battle of worldviews. And if we only think that we need to join in that battle, I think we are missing the other option. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Thanks very much for the attention, and let's see if we have some time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was definitely helpful, at least for me, who created the theme for the conference. So thank you so much. I want to save the first question to you, and then while other people can think of, we can have like 15 minutes for Q&A, no problem. So first question is actually plan was you did this first keynote, and Professor Kwak Dok-ju from our department is going to respond to your talk, but she had to talk to the audience without having your talk. So now I'm going to turn it around. I want you to respond to her because I heard that you read her work. So if there are anything that you can comment on her work, so that will make us like having a little bit of panel discussion in like side way. Is that all right?
It's all right, but I haven't very carefully studied Professor Kwak's paper. So I think what I found interesting in the paper is highlighting the gains of perspectivism, and that's also what I try to do in my presentation, to say the age of the worldview makes a particular freedom possible, makes a particular position for the individual possible. And I think particularly when you look at that through history and also in relation to the history of colonialism, which always denies many people even the ability of a position, I think that is an important gain. I really liked that about Professor Kwak's paper, to not to forget that gain. I still think that where you can go with that is probably a little different where Professor Kwak is going and where I am going. I have some concern that even the idea of the post-colonial can quickly become another perspective, and then I think it loses its political urgency. So I think one real question is how you keep that political and not make it into, I think, another perspective. But that's I think the difficulty also of what I'm I'm trying to explore, because this idea of perspective has become so natural that I see many people find it difficult to even think that you can go outside of perspectives. But I think that the bringing in the whole question of post-coloniality is really important, because it puts an angle on the whole question of the losses and the gains and the power relationships. And probably I would then make the point even more political than philosophical. That would be my quick response.
Thank you. I think Professor, I'm not sure whether you can see her. But can you raise your hands, Professor? Yeah, I think she looks pleased. Great. So I'm going to open the floor to the audience. Is there anyone who wants to ask a question? Only thing that you have to do is that you have to run in front, because this is only microphone we can use with this complicated system. So I want to invite someone really desperate to run. Ready? Come on. Yeah, please, come in.
Thank you very much, Professor. It was really, really insightful and thought-provoking talk. And very difficult to understand the whole concept. But I think, you know, I'm an art historian, by the way. I happen to be an art historian. But anyway, it was really interesting that you started from Brunelleschi, you know, one point perspective. And perspectivalism, I think is really, it matters a lot. And it gives us a lot of problems and, you know, confusions, right? Confusions. But anyway, I thought about Dasein. You mentioned. It's being there. It's being there. Literally, it's being there. So we are in different places, in different, there. Everybody has in different places, right? And maybe it is inevitable for us to have a perspective, because we dwell in different, we are dwelling in different places. So I was wondering how we can go from Dasein to a call from things. Things different everywhere. So that was my first question. It's really kind of ontological, you know, fundamental ontological question, which is really, really difficult for me. I'm trying to kind of figure it out how. You know, the last thing you mentioned, a call, is really insightful. But how, you know, it's a call, so we have to respond because it's a call, right? So, so maybe that's why the problem of post-colonialism arose a little bit, because there's so many different situations here. So I was just wondering, you know, you know, how you think of the premises or the not perspective, of kind of conditions of ontological, you know, being. Yeah, so that was my question.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah, thanks very much. This is indeed the challenge. So I think you articulated beautifully by also hesitating in your formulation. You asked, is perspective inevitable? And I think that's indeed the question behind what I'm trying to do, because it looks like it's inevitable. And probably that then intrigues me. If we think, is this really inevitable? Are we, is perspectives we have, is that the only way of being? And what I've tried to do on the one hand is to say, what does this notion of perspective mean? Where does it come from? But then to ask, can we think very differently about how we conduct our own lives? And it's interesting that it comes back to that question. So I don't end up, say, with a new theory of the universe, so it's definitely not an ontology, but it goes to a very practical question. What do I do with my life, in my life? And there somewhere, I think there is a way to break out of this inevitability of perspective. And the reason for that, maybe the urgency, has to do with some of these bigger problems I identified, that I think that at the moment there is war in the world that is exactly about people's perspectives, where Putin has a perspective on how the world should be and Trump has a perspective. And that's where the clashes happen. And for me, that also raises the question, so if we are after peace rather than war, what does that require? And this idea that the world calls is, you can say again, not an ontology, but it's a very different way to wake up in the morning, you could say. Now, I don't think that because the world calls, or people call, or animals call, or the planet calls, we have to respond. Because what also matters to me is human freedom. But again, what I'm trying to do is to say, human freedom means not the freedom to just do what you want to do, because again, I think that creates a lot of problems. But it's the freedom you find when you realize that that there are things that only you can do, or you cannot simply say, yeah, the world is calling, but I'll let someone else solve the problem for me. So their freedom also comes in differently. So the explorations are philosophical, but for me, the questions are very concrete and I think very contemporary. And they have to do with power, and therefore I think the whole question
to be brief, so we can have one more question squeezed in. Is it okay? So Kaya, if you can come up, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Hello, Professor Bista. I'm Kaya Lee.
Hello. Hi.
I have one clarifying and potentially petty question, and one hopefully substantive question. First question, so the Marion's painting case was illuminating and also a bit confusing for me. So if I understand your talk correctly, you're talking about change of heart, not change of perspective. But the Marion's painting example does literally involve change of perspective. Like you have to change the place that you stand from which you view the painting, right? So is it to suggest that change of heart does require change of perspective, but maybe more than that? Or are you trying to say something different? So that's one clarifying question. Second substantive question is, so you kept showing these slides where one person stands and looking into the world. And it seems like you're describing this self and world relationship and what the sort of normative configuration should be. But why do you assume that the self is singular? That was my substantive question. I think Heidegger does something interesting in The Being and Time. Dasein is neither singular or nor plural, right? Or individual human being is often referred to as a case of Dasein in Being and Time, if I remember correctly. And Dasein can be a collective term for human beings, whereas in your work, in your presentation, it was one singular human being and the world, and that there seems to be a lot of like assumptions there about individualism. So I was wondering if you could unpack that. Thank you.
Yes, please. You can answer, Kurt.
Yeah, okay. So the point of the painting, the example, is that if you just stand in front of the painting and think, I need to put a perspective on it, I need to interpret the painting, I need to make sense of it, then the point is you will never see what the painting has to give you. And I would say that this move to find the point where the painting can give you something is precisely not a matter of your perspective, but it's the work you do so that you can find this point where the painting can give itself. So that is in that idea. And again, you can see how difficult it is to go beyond thinking that everything is a perspective. And then you could say to do the work to find the point where the painting can give itself to you, that has something to do with this change of heart, because you have to make a decision to start looking for that point. About the singularity of the self, which is also a philosophical discussion. Here, philosophically, I go beyond Heidegger, and for me, Levinas is much more helpful. Of course, as human beings, we never exist on our own. We are thrown in this world where there are other human beings and other beings existing. But I think the question that is a question uniquely for each of us is how we conduct our own life. And there I would say the self is singular. But again, it's a very practical question. How do I conduct my own life? And then we can look for help with other human beings. That's all fine. But I think at the end of the day, there is one moment where we have to conduct our own life. And that's why I highlight something about the self as being with itself.
Great, thank you so much. So we have one more, probably last question. Pyeongjin, are you going to come up? Great.
Thank you, Professor Biesta. I'll cut out the introductions for the sake of time. And my question is rather simple and reflective. What could bind this audience together, educational researchers together, the so-called professional education research community together in your new, I wouldn't say framework or paradigm or those grandiose word, in this, your concept of metanoia, if not perspective? To give a little bit more explanations, like what Professor Kwok mentioned in her paper regarding Professor Zhang's work, I believe what has been bounding us together as a research community was that we were striving to develop a common educational perspective. Sure, engineering, administration, philosophy, they have little minor differences regarding their perspectives, but we kind of had this belief that we are striving towards a common educational perspective, and that's what binds us together as this community of researchers. And according to your presentation, where we should move beyond taking just perspectives as our way of being, and also in the research, then I have to question myself, in this new era, how do we define ourselves? How do we see commonalities in ourselves? And what kind of common languages or identity or anything that can rely on to call ourselves as a connected community? So I know it's a grandiose question, but it has always been triggering me, as well as when people ask me, what is education research community? Thank you.
All right, good, thanks.
Great. Thanks very much. That's a beautiful last question, because I think my whole talk also challenges the whole question of what it means to be a researcher. Because a lot of research is framed as viewing the world from a particular perspective. And you also ask what then bounds educational researchers together, or what gives them an identity. And I would, for the sake of time, say what gives educational researchers an identity is not a common perspective, but I would say a common concern. And the interesting question is then, what is the common concern of educational researchers? And you can do that in quite a superficial way. You can say our concern is to make education better. That's what you often hear, talks about improvement. But you can also say that the common concern of all educational researchers should be the opportunity for the dignity of the life of the new generation. And that would position educational research somewhere else, not as a particular perspective, but to say educational researchers have something to care for. And that identifies research as educational. And for me, that would be a more interesting way to go. And of course, then we need to have good conversations about what is it that we want to take care of? How can we be guardians or caretakers of that? And what can research do there? But also, what are the dangers where research actually gets in the way of that? And I think research is doing that as well. And for me, this is a different way to think about the identity of educational researchers individually and collectively. But it has a historical origin, because this is how education identified itself in the beginning of the 20th century in continental Europe. Not as saying we have an object that we study, but to say we have a common concern and a common care, and all our research needs to be in the service of that concern.
Beautiful.
That's it.
Beautiful, girl. Thank you so much. I think you answered it really well. Yeah, I don't know about Pyeongjun's face, but I think he's okay. I think we have to close the session, unfortunately. But what I want to suggest is that everyone can stand up, because you guys look so tiny from Gort's screen. So I think what we can do is that we stand up to give him a sense of the presence that we really enjoyed the talk. Yeah, at least that you can see now bigger, right? And that, yes. Okay, good. Although we're really sad that we missed you, but thank you so much. I think it's worth waiting for everyone, and I really hope, and we all hope, that you take care of yourself and be well. And we are very looking forward next chance to be actually where our path come across in person.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. I have a lovely day. Bye for now, Gott.
Thanks so much. Bye everyone. Bye-bye.
All right, so we're going to go straight into the closing ceremony. I think it will be like 20 minutes, but it will be really, I don't know, I will really appreciate if you stay here to be with us to celebrate all the hard work that went into this. If you enjoyed the conference, can you just stay for another 20 minutes to be with us? That would be really good. Oh, if you have urgent things, it's okay, but we will continue. So can you come in? So all staff members working hard outside should come in, because this is the last part that we have to celebrate. So
Good evening, distinguished guests, colleagues, and researchers and students. We will start the closing ceremony. My name is Sang Ri from Seoul National University. It's my great honor to serve as the chair of the closing ceremony for ICER 2026. Over the past 2 days, we have come together under the theme Educational Research for the Post-World, Multiple Interpretations and Methodologies. Through our keynotes, paper, and poster presentation, and many engaging conversations, we have been invited to rethink the role, direction, and possibility of education research in a world where familiar assumptions are being questioned and new realities continue to emerge. I believe that this conference has been a meaningful space, not only for presenting research outcomes, but also asking new questions, listening to different thoughts, building connections, and imagining how education research might respond to the complexity of our time. We are deeply grateful to all of you, our keynote speakers, presenters, discussants, session chairs, and all participants, for your thoughtful contribution and active engagement throughout the conference. Your presence, insights, and care have made ICER 2026 beautiful. Thank you for your part of this shared journey. So let's start the closing ceremony, ISO 2026, with a round of applause for all of us. Now we will watch the conference video. Before we continue with our last few events on our agenda, let us take a moment to celebrate our learning, sharing, and inspiration of the past 2 days. We hope it brings back good memories of our time together.
3, 2, 1.
Beautiful ICER.
Beautiful ICER! Beautiful ICER! Beautiful ICER!
Beautiful ICER.
Now, we come to one of the highlights of our closing ceremony. Supporting emerging scholars has always been an important part of ICER. And this year, we will delight to see so many outstanding poster presentations from graduate students around the world. The Graduate Student Post Award recognized excellence and hard work in graduate student research and presentation. This year, we are pleased to present awards to the first, second, and third place. And to present the third and second place award, I would like to invite Professor Han-seok Oh, Director of Education Research Institute, Seoul National University, to join us on the stage. Our third place award goes to Ken Asner from Korea University. Certificate of Excellence. This is to certify that Ken Asner has been awarded the third place Graduate Student Post Award. In recognition of outstanding research presented at ICER 2026, held at Seoul National University, July 9 to 10, 2026. For the post entitled, The Effect of Usage of Feedback Approach on Student, Use of Functional Lexical Chunks. Congratulations. And second place goes to Seung-eun Lee from Yonsei University. Certificate of Excellence. This is to certify that Seung-eun Lee, Yonsei University, has been awarded the second place Graduate Student Post Award in recognition of outstanding research presented at ICER 2026, held at Seoul National University, July 9 to 10, 2026. For the post entitled, When the Future Cannot Be Questioned, a post-future critique of AI educational policy. Congratulations once again, and thank you, Professor Oh. Next, I would like to invite Professor Deok-ju Kwak, Editor-in-Chief of Asia Pacific Educational Review and keynote of ICER 2026, to present this year's first place Graduate Student Post Award. The first place award goes to Subin Kim from Seoul National University. Certificate of Excellence. This is to certify that Subin Kim, Seoul National University, had been awarded the first place Graduate Student Post Award in recognition of an outstanding research presented at ICER 2026, held at Seoul National University, July 9 to 10, 2026. For the post entitled, A Differentiative Analysis of Novice Teacher Non-Doing Agency. Thank you, Professor Huang, and congratulations to our all awards recipients. Please join me giving them another warm round of applause. As we bring ICER 2026 to a close, it is now my pleasure to invite Professor Kyung-mi Lee, Chair of our ICER 2026, to deliver the closing remarks. Please join me in welcoming Professor Lee.
All right, thank you so much. All staffs here? I want you to be here. Okay, thank you so much for being here with us. I know it's quite a day. I prepare a couple pages, but I'll cut the half, so don't worry. So did you have fun? Yeah, thank you. Oh, that's good to hear. I had fun. So last year, about a year ago, I was thinking about, I was told to do this year. So I was very happily thinking about the theme for this year. And the theme actually came up from my personal struggle. I was exposed to too many posts and I was very confused. And then I was tired and sick and tired of learning always the new things to follow up and looking like fashionable. So it's personal struggle kind of came into like making this theme. And last year, exactly a year ago, I was talking to Professor Oh and my committee members, telling that I want to say next year's theme is what the fuck is post in post. And then they were like, okay, Kyung-mi, I don't think that that's a good idea. And they really helped me to make it presentable. Although I think that the original plan sounded much more, I don't know, realistic with the poster, but I had to give that up to for the dignity of the department. So that's what happened, and I was having a lot of conversation with my colleagues and friends and staff here, and then it was very fruitful. So I really hope that you had the same experience with like mine. So cut that through. I wanted to mention just one thing because I want to thank everyone for being very kindly cooperating with us. So one thing that we tried this year was make a conference eco-friendly. You know what that means. So I'm sorry that we are very stingy about giving you cups, but it's not because we don't have money for cups, but we really don't want to talk about this post-world and thinking about climate crisis and talking about it and then just throwing out of all this coffee cups and making bags of trash after the conference. So that's what we tried to do. And then best compliment that I got was actually coming from the cleaning staff of the building. And he was literally told us that this was the best conference because he'd been seeing more than 100 conferences happening in the building for the past 10 years. But, oh, sorry, can you just help me? And then he said that normally, every day, he used 6 big bags of trash, all coming from just cups from the coffee. And this year, what we have done is that the entire day, more than 300 people, we just did how many? 2. So, I think... And he was happy, and then he really wished every single conference is like this, and then he can have kind of comfortable afternoon. So I was very happy, and then thank you so much for staff and then everyone here who was helping us to be able to do that. And then a lot of thanks, but some of the thanks I already have done by my co-partner here, so I'll just get rid of that. Although I have to say that, I've been feeling so supportive, especially by my co-chair. So every time that things have been very difficult, my co-chair, Professor Hansuk Oh, he has been giving me a lot of support and acknowledgement, and also it's okay to go ahead. Whatever you want, just do it. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And then, more importantly, so I have just one page left, don't worry, I'll be very quick. So more importantly, I would like to call out a few names that will remain. Oh, I'm going to cry, but only... Oh. In my heart forever. I think someone else should read it for me, but I'll try. I practice so much, so I'll be okay. So I wouldn't have ever been able to do this anywhere near this quality without these people. So please be patient. It will be taking probably 3 or 4 minutes. So first of all, I would like to thank our staff lead, Baek and Chae, for supporting my vision and making it possible. I think you're the only student, a PhD student, who is saying consistently no to professor. I've never seen anyone like that. But you have been perfect partner because you calmed me down, and then I didn't do anything crazy because of your support. So thank you so much. I hope that you are happy about what you have achieved with us together. So thanks to Sung-Yi Lim, who was in charge of so many different things I can't even remember, and I don't have time to say that all here. But I really hope that you remember that I'm a very difficult person to please, and that you have done it really well. So if there is any regret, it's remember me. It was not you. It was totally me. So you did awesome. Thank you. So Hyunju Kim, I was so relieved to have you. One of the best moments for me in this journey was opening Canva to see your beautiful design of staff T-shirts and reusable cup. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Min Sun Chun for taking care of all our invited speakers. You know, you guys are difficult to bring it over here. 100 pages of document that she has to write to have you here. And I think you did awesome. You not only brought these people, but brought these people with non-human actor of their thinking and insights. It was awesome. Thank you so much. Subin Lee, I can't believe that you have just joined in our lab. You're a true gem for us. And thank you so much for taking care of all the name on registration and up-to-date ICER homepage. Hyunwoo Park, Eun-young Kim, Hyo-jung Lee for your beautiful program book and proceedings. I know that you didn't know what you signed up for. And then I know that you didn't sign up for the crazy endless editing job, but the conference proceedings and spotlessly edited book is something that I feel most proud of. So thank you so much. I'll go Hyun Lee for supporting our finance. I know it's most difficult and annoying job, but good luck with you next year, 2027. I saw with Sang-woo. So I hope that you learned the lesson from doing this for us. Good. So Kyung-won Hwang for organizing pre-conference workshop and 회식 tonight. I'm so looking forward to it. I'm ready to drink. So your support and leadership calm me down all the time. Thank you so much. Byung-jun Yu for taking care of K-culture event. Your Gangnam style will be remembered. You will be so missed as well. Jinan Kim for beautiful, beautiful ICER video capturing all of our unforgettable memories. I know that you worked until 3 a.m. yesterday. I really appreciate that. Yejin Kim for making all the presentation go so smoothly. I was so lucky to have you on board. I know it was difficult, but good luck. And good luck with your next journey. We're going to miss you too. So finally, okay, it's the last couple lines. Did I miss anyone? Raise your hands. Yeah, you're a bunch there. So finally, our on-site support staff. Jin Kim, Eunji Son, Haram Kim, Ji-hee Yoon, Jina-song, Jun-seok Kim, Sung-jin An, and Young-in Lee. You guys are all awesome and very professional, impressive. I loved it so much, and then we got all the good comments of how smooth things are. So thank you so much for spending your time with us for the past 3 days. You know what? We are not full-time conference organizers. I have full-time job, too many of that. I do research as well, just so you know. And all my students are full-time PhD students with their social and personal life responsibility as well. However, they almost like put themselves in this work for the past at least 6 months. I know there are some parts that you may be unsure about. It was not perfect. I mean, I know a lot of mistakes that we made here. But I really hope that as a community you understand how hard, and everything was good it was well intended. And I have to say that BS that being sick is not our fault, right? So other than that, I think we did really okay. Don't you agree? So please, as we leave this conference, just remember all the good things happen here. Forget about all the bad things happen here and there. And just remember clearly that that was not our fault. And then let us continue to have this conversation began here. And let us continue to think carefully and critically and ethically about education research in this messy post-world. I really hope that we can together make a change of heart or from the heart, although we don't really know what that is exactly. But let's try it. If you need, you can always revisit all the quality paper officially published online. Also, visit our YouTube channel, Shabang TV, and then you can watch our keynotes over there. All right, now I really wish you a safe journey home, and I really look forward to seeing you at 2027 ICER, but that time as a participant. Thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you, Kyungmiri, for your passionate and beautiful remarks. This concludes the 26th International Conference on Educational Research. Thank you again for your active participation, your thoughtful discussion, and your valuable contributions throughout the conference. We hope that the conversation begin hereover will continue through future collaboration and new direction in our research and practices. The next year, ICER 2027 will happen again here at Seoul National University, 8 to 9 of July 2027. As a chair of ICER 2027, I really hope you welcome you again next year. Please have safe journey home and take care until we meet again. Thank you very much.